welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. Forum user Night Nurse Eliza posted April 12, 2025, 6:12 a.m. Thread: something strange happening at Memorial Hospital. I don't normally post here, but I need to document this somewhere people might understand. Maybe I'm overreacting, but after what I saw during my shift last night, I can't just pretend everything's normal. I keep telling myself there's a rational explanation, but my hands won't stop shaking, even hours later. I'm an ER nurse at Memorial Hospital downtown, night shift, which means I've seen my fair share of strange cases over the years. Overdoses where patients claim insects are crawling under their skin. Sleepwalkers who arrived with no memory of how they got to the hospital. A man who swore his shadow was trying to strangle him. You develop a certain immunity to the bizarre in this job. But last night was different. It started around 2:17 a.m. I remember checking the time because the ER had been unusually quiet, and I was wondering if I might actually get a proper break. That's when they brought in the John Doe. Male, mid-30s, found unconscious in Riverside Park by some teenagers. Vitals stable but barely responsive, no ID, no visible trauma. At first glance, nothing that unusual. It wasn't until we were cutting away his clothes that I noticed it. His skin had these patches. Not bruises or rashes, they were luminescent. Not like a glow-in-the-dark toy, but subtler, like light trapped just beneath the surface. The patches were concentrated around his neck, wrists, and chest, small areas that pulsed with a faint bluish-white light. Dr. Patel said it might be some new street drug, maybe something with phosphorescent compounds. I was taking a sample for the lab when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I'm not supposed to check personal messages during shifts, but something made me look. It wasn't a text or call. It was an emergency alert. Emergency alert. City Health Department notice. If you observe unusual skin discoloration with luminescent properties, do not seek medical attention. Remain at home. Avoid physical contact with others. Further instructions forthcoming. I nearly dropped my phone. The alert had to be about this. The timing was too perfect. But how? The patient had just arrived, and we hadn't even filed reports yet. I showed Dr. Patel, who looked as confused as I felt. He said he hadn't received any alert and suggested my phone might have glitched. When I tried to pull up the alert again to show him, it was gone. No record in my notification history. Nothing. I convinced myself I must have imagined it, that the sleepless nights were finally catching up with me. Then the second patient arrived at 3:40 a.m. Female, early 20s, conscious but disoriented. She had the same markings, but more extensive, geometric patterns tracing up her arms like luminous tattoos. Unlike the first patient, she was agitated, kept muttering about the humming and how they're calling us. By 5 a.m., we had 4 more cases, each with the same glowing marks, varying in intensity. Hospital administration called a meeting, but strangely, no one mentioned any emergency alert. Had I really been the only one to receive it? That's when my neighbor Julian texted me. Julian's eccentric. A work-from-home data analyst with too many conspiracy theories and not enough social interaction. But he's harmless, and sometimes brings me coffee when he sees me dragging myself home after a long shift. Julian, did you get that weird health alert? About glowing skin? Me, you got it too? Julian, yeah, but it disappeared from my phone. Seems like not everyone got it. What's going on? Me, I don't know. We have patients with exactly those symptoms at the hospital right now. Julian, at Memorial? Are they quarantined? Me, no, why would they be? Julian, because the CDC just sent a containment team to your hospital. It's not on the news yet. I thought he was being his usual paranoid self until I glanced out the ER windows and saw black SUVs pulling into the ambulance bay. Men and women in dark suits were unloading equipment, led by a tall man with graying temples and glasses who moved with military precision. Dr. Marcus Reeves, he introduced himself as CDC Containment Specialist. No further explanation. They quarantined the glowing patients immediately, setting up a makeshift isolation zone in the East Wing. Dr. Reeves questioned each staff member who'd had contact with the patients. When he got to me, his eyes lingered on my face longer than was comfortable. Did you receive any unusual notifications on your devices in the last 12 hours, Nurse Chin? He asked. I hesitated. Something in his tone made me uneasy. No, elite. Nothing unusual. He studied me for a moment, then nodded and moved on. I left at the end of my shift at 7 a.m., passing a police car parked across from the hospital entrance. The officer inside, a woman with sharp eyes and copper hair pulled into a tight bun, watched me walk to my car. For a moment, I thought she might stop me, but she just made a note on a clipboard. When I got home, I saw Julian watching from his window across the courtyard. He gestured for me to come over, but I pretended not to see him. I needed sleep and time to process. That was 4 hours ago. I've been trying to sleep, but every time I close my eyes, I see those glowing patterns. I keep checking my phone for that alert, wondering if I'm losing my mind. Something else is bothering me. While changing into my sleep clothes, I noticed a small patch of skin on my inner wrist. It could be nothing, just irritation from the hospital's harsh soap or a reaction to the latex gloves. But in the darkness of my bathroom, with the lights off, I swear it has the faintest luminescence, like starlight under my skin. I'm writing this all down before I forget the details. If anyone else has seen these symptoms or received that alert, please respond. And if you know anything about what's happening, share it. I'll check back after I get some rest, assuming I can sleep at all. End of post. Comments 0. Forum user Night Nurse Eliza posted April 13th, 2025, 5:43 a.m. Thread. Something strange happening at Memorial Hospital update. I shouldn't be posting this. We were explicitly told not to discuss what's happening at the hospital. But people deserve to know, especially since the official channels are saying nothing or worse, lying. Last night's shift was chaos. I arrived at 11 p.m. to find a security checkpoint at the staff entrance. 2 men in hazmat suits were scanning employees with handheld devices before allowing entry. When my turn came, they focused the scanner on my exposed skin, especially my face and hands. One of them lingered over my wrist, the same spot where I'd noticed that faint glow yesterday. I held my breath, but the device remained silent, and they waved me through. Inside, Memorial Hospital had transformed. The entire East Wing was sealed off with plastic containment barriers. Official CDC signs warned against unauthorized entry, citing possible infectious agent. Staff whispered about isolation protocols and government oversight, conversations that died the moment Dr. Reeves or his team appeared. The regular ER was still functioning, but the tension was suffocating. I overheard Dr. Patel arguing with hospital administration. The public has a right to know what they're dealing with. These aren't standard infection control measures. He was reassigned to the pediatric floor before the shift ended. Around 1 a.m., the ambulances started arriving. Not 1 or 2, a steady stream. I counted 12 patients in 3 hours, all exhibiting the same symptoms: luminescent skin patterns, disorientation, elevated body temperature. But unlike yesterday's cases, many of these patients were conscious and disturbingly coherent. They're saying it's a viral phosphorescence. One woman told me as I checked her vitals. Her arms were covered in intricate, glowing geometric lines. That's the official story on the news. But it's not a virus. It's changing me. I can feel it in my dreams. Before I could ask what she meant, a CDC worker appeared and directed her to the East Wing. She grabbed my hand as they took her. They're lying about the alerts, she whispered. They know exactly what's happening. I was updating charts when my phone vibrated. Another emergency alert. Emergency alert. City Health Department notice. Recent reports of skin luminescence are attributed to exposure to an industrial phosphorescent compound. Affected individuals should isolate at home. Do not share images of affected areas online. Do not discuss symptoms on social media. These measures protect patient privacy and prevent misinformation. This time, I wasn't the only one who received it. Several staff members checked their phones simultaneously. But the explanation felt hollow. It didn't match what we were seeing or the scale of the CDC response. During my break, I slipped into the bathroom and examined my wrist under the dimmed lights. The luminescence had spread, forming a thin line that extended 2 inches up my forearm. In bright light, it was barely visible, a slight discoloration that could be dismissed as a vein under pale skin. But in darkness, it emitted an unmistakable blue-white glow. My hands trembled as I pulled my sleeve down. I should report it. That's protocol. But after seeing those patients vanish into the East Wing, I couldn't bring myself to become another case file. I nearly jumped out of my skin when my phone vibrated again. Julian, you working tonight? Me, yes. It's worse. More patients. Julian, I've been monitoring emergency channels. They've set up similar containment zones at 3 other hospitals across the city. Me, how do you know this? Julian, I have my ways. The official alerts are misdirection. They don't want panic. Me, do you know what's causing it? Julian, not yet, but it's spreading geometrically. Come by after your shift. I found something. Before I could respond, Officer Kate Mercer walked into the break room, the same copper-haired police officer I'd seen watching the hospital yesterday. She wore a standard patrol uniform, but something about her seemed too observant, too calculated for regular police presence. Nurse Chen? She asked, approaching my table. Mind if I join you? She didn't wait for an answer. Her eyes flicked to my phone, then to my face. Long night? She asked. They all are lately, I replied, tucking my phone away. I imagine so, with everything that's happening. She studied me, her gaze uncomfortably penetrating. You've had direct contact with the affected patients, correct? I've treated patients, yes. And have you noticed anything unusual? About yourself, I mean, my wrist seemed to burn beneath my sleeve. No, elite. Nothing unusual. Officer Mercer smiled thinly. That's good. If you do notice anything, even something small, you should report it immediately. For your own safety. She slid a business card across the table. Directly to me. After she left, I examined the card. It listed her as part of a public health liaison unit I'd never heard of before. The remainder of my shift passed in a blur of nervous energy. 2 more patients arrived, both further along in whatever this condition was. Their skin patterns were brighter, more extensive, forming what looked almost like circuitry across their bodies. Both were immediately taken to the East Wing. As I was preparing to leave, Dr. Reeves intercepted me in the locker room. Nurse Chun, a moment. His voice was professionally detached, but his eyes were sharp behind his glasses. You seem distracted tonight. Is everything all right? Just tired, I said. Understandable. We're all under pressure. He leaned against the wall, blocking my path slightly. Have you been monitoring yourself for symptoms? Any changes to report? I shook my head. Good. He straightened. The situation is under control, but vigilance is essential. If you notice anything unusual, anything at all, don't hesitate. Report it immediately. It was almost word for word what Officer Mercer had said. I made it to my car without further interactions, but as I drove home, I noticed more police presence on the streets, more people checking their phones with worried expressions. The city felt different, tense, watchful. Julian was waiting outside my apartment when I arrived. Show me your arm, he said without preamble. I stared at him. What? Your wrist. I saw you checking it in your car yesterday. Reluctantly, I pushed up my sleeve. The luminescent line had extended further, now branching like a river delta up my forearm. Julian nodded grimly. "Come inside. There's something you need to see." As I write this now, sitting in Julian's apartment surrounded by his research, I'm terrified. What he's discovered about these patterns, about the government's response, about what happens to the patients in those containment zones, it changes everything. I'll update when I can, but I need to be careful now. They're watching the networks. If your skin starts to glow, don't seek help. Don't trust the alerts. And whatever you do, don't let them take you. End of post. Comments. Disabled by moderator. Forum user, Night Nurse Eliza. Posted April 14th, 2025, 3:27 a.m. Thread. Encrypted post. Access key required. I'm using Julian's encrypted connection to post this. My regular account was suspended for spreading misinformation related to a public health incident. That's how they're classifying it now. A public health incident. Not an outbreak, not an epidemic. Just an incident. Julian's apartment is a digital fortress. 3 monitors displaying cascading data streams, walls covered in printouts connected by red string, the classic conspiracy theorist setup. I would have laughed if what he showed me wasn't so disturbing. "It started 5 days ago," he explained, pulling up satellite imagery of what looked like a crash site in the woods about 30 miles outside the city. Official reports called it a meteorite, but the containment response was immediate and massive. Military cordoned off the area within hours. He showed me leaked footage from first responders, blurry nighttime video of a metallic object partially buried in scorched earth. Not large, maybe the size of a car, with an organic, almost vein-like surface texture that reflected light strangely. The footage ended abruptly as figures in hazmat suits entered the frame. 12 hours after recovery, the first skin luminescence cases appeared in the city, Julian continued, all within a 5-mile radius of Memorial Hospital, where the object was reportedly transported. "The hospital has no secure research facilities," I argued. "Why would they bring it there? They didn't, not intentionally." Julian pulled up a map showing a vehicle accident on the route between the crash site and what he believed was a military research facility. The transport was compromised. Something escaped or was released. I wanted to dismiss it as another of Julian's theories, but the timeline matched perfectly with what I'd seen. "What about the emergency alerts?" I asked. "Why tell people not to seek help?" "Control," Julian said simply. "They're tracking the spread patterns. If everyone with symptoms reported to hospitals, they'd lose their ability to monitor the natural progression." He showed me transmissions he'd intercepted from CDC secure channels. Phrases like geometric expansion rate and luminous integration markers appeared repeatedly. Most disturbing was a directive regarding Stage 3 subjects, who should be immediately transferred to Facility 7 for terminal observation. Terminal observation. The words made my skin crawl. I slept fitfully on Julian's couch, dreaming of glowing veins spreading beneath my skin, of being strapped to a table while Dr. Reeves stood over me with cold eyes and surgical instruments. I woke to find the luminescent pattern had extended past my elbow overnight, branching into delicate fractals that pulsed faintly with my heartbeat. Julian documented it with his camera, comparing the pattern to similar designs found in the leaked footage of the crashed object. Despite Julian's warnings, I went to work for my shift tonight. I couldn't abandon my patients, and besides, my absence would raise immediate suspicion. I wore a long-sleeved compression shirt under my scrubs to hide the spreading glow. The hospital had transformed again. Armed guards now patrolled the corridors. The East Wing had been expanded to include the entire 3rd floor. More CDC personnel moved through the halls with purpose, their faces grim. 3 more emergency alerts had been issued to the public, each increasingly restrictive. Emergency alert. City Health Department notice. Mandatory checkpoint screening. All citizens must pass through health verification points before entering public buildings or using mass transit. Non-compliance will result in immediate detention. This measure protects public health and safety. Emergency alert. City Health Department notice. Mandatory curfew in effect. All citizens must remain indoors between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Report unusual activity to authorities immediately. Cooperation ensures community safety. Emergency alert. City Health Department notice. Misinformation warning. Sharing unauthorized information about skin luminescence symptoms is prohibited. Penalties include fines up to $100,000 and detention. Trust only official channels for accurate health information. The ER was nearly empty when I arrived, the result of the new restrictions, I assumed. Most staff avoided eye contact, focused on their tasks with mechanical precision. The fear was palpable. I was assigned to triage away from the quarantine zones. For 2 hours, I performed routine care for non-luminescence cases, constantly aware of the growing warmth beneath my sleeve. Then they brought in a child. A boy, maybe 8 years old, unconscious and burning with fever. His mother had been detained at a checkpoint, but he'd been rushed to the hospital when his vital signs became critical. When I cut away his shirt, I had to stifle a gasp. The luminescent patterns covered his entire torso, far more advanced than any case I'd seen. They pulsed in rhythm, not with his heartbeat, but with something else, something external. And they were changing, shifting slightly even as I watched, like living circuitry rearranging itself. I was documenting his vitals when I felt a presence behind me. Officer Mercer stood watching, her copper hair pulled back tightly, her eyes fixed on the boy. "Stage 3, she said quietly, almost to herself. Then, noticing me, "You shouldn't be handling this case, Nurse Chun." "He's my patient," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not anymore." She gestured, and 2 CDC workers appeared with a special transport gurney. "He's being transferred to a specialized facility. His condition is unstable," I protested. "Moving him could. That's not your concern." Officer Mercer's tone was final. As they prepared to move the boy, she stepped closer to me. "You seem unusually invested in these cases, Nurse Chun." I forced myself to meet her gaze. "I'm invested in all my patients, of course." Her eyes dropped briefly to my covered arm. "Those compression sleeves are good for circulation during long shifts, aren't they?" My blood ran cold. She knew, or at least suspected. "Doctor's recommendation," I managed to say. She nodded slowly. "Smart. Following medical advice is important." Speaking of which, she produced a small device from her pocket, similar to the scanners at the entrance. "We're implementing random screenings of all staff. Just a precaution." I took an involuntary step back. "I need to check on another patient. This will only take a moment." She activated the device, which emitted a soft blue glow. I was saved by the arrival of Dr. Reeves, who swept into the area with urgent purpose. "Officer Mercer, we have a situation in Containment Zone 2. I need you there immediately." She hesitated, looking between him and me, before reluctantly pocketing the scanner. "We'll continue this later, Nurse Chun." After they left, I retreated to the supply closet, heart pounding. The luminescence under my sleeve had intensified, as if responding to my fear. It now extended to my shoulder, forming patterns that somehow looked meaningful, as if they were trying to communicate something. "I need to leave the hospital tonight." Julian was right, they're not trying to cure this thing. They're studying it, categorizing its progression, determining who's useful for observation and who isn't. I don't know what this is or what it's doing to me, but I know I can't end up in Facility 7 for terminal observation. If anyone reads this, be careful. Check for the signs. Trust no one in authority. I'll update if I can. End of post. Connection terminated. Forum user, anonymous whistleblower, posted April 15th, 2025, 12:18 a.m. Thread, encrypted channel, location masked. I lost my phone. Left it in my locker at the hospital when I fled. They can track those things, that's how they've been monitoring the spread. The luminescent patterns emit a unique frequency that interacts with wireless devices. Julian figured it out. That's why the emergency alerts disappeared from our notification history. They were targeted specifically at those already exhibiting early symptoms. I'm using Julian's equipment to post this. He has multiple encrypted channels and routing protocols that should keep us hidden for now. But I don't know how long that will last. I never made it through my full shift last night. After my encounter with Officer Mercer, I knew they were closing in. The warmth beneath my skin had intensified, almost like a warning. I waited until the staff rotation at 2 a.m., when the monitoring was lightest, then simply walked out through the maintenance exit. No dramatic escape. I just removed my badge, put on a jacket from the lost and found to cover my scrubs, and left. 2 blocks from the hospital, I saw the black SUVs heading toward Memorial. A convoy of them with CDC markings but military precision. Something was happening. Something big. Julian was waiting in his car 3 blocks away, as we'd arranged in case of emergency. His face was grim as I slid into the passenger seat. They've initiated full containment protocols, he said, pulling into traffic. The entire hospital is being locked down. Because of me? My voice sounded small even to my own ears. Not just you. The patterns are accelerating in all subjects. They've lost control of the progression curve. Back at his apartment, Julian showed me what he'd been working on while I was at the hospital. He'd isolated the frequency emitted by the luminescent patterns and discovered something extraordinary. They were communicating. Not just with each other, but with some external source. It's a network, he explained, showing me waveform analyses on his monitor. Each infected person becomes a node. The patterns aren't just spreading, they're organizing. Into what? I asked. I don't know yet, but look at this. He pulled up a map of the city with glowing dots representing known cases based on hospital records he'd hacked. The distribution wasn't random. It formed a perfect spiral pattern emanating from Memorial Hospital. It's too ordered to be natural, Julian said. Whatever this is, it has intelligence, purpose. My arm chose that moment to flare with light, bright enough to shine through my sleeve. The pain wasn't severe, more like intense pressure, as if something were pushing outward from beneath my skin. When it subsided, I rolled up my sleeve to find the pattern had changed again. The luminescent lines had reorganized into more complex formations, extending now across my chest. Julian photographed the new patterns, his expression a mixture of fear and fascination. When he compared them to his frequency maps, his eyes widened. Eliza, your patterns, they match the distribution map of the infection across the city. It's a microcosm of the larger spread. Before I could process what that meant, emergency alerts began broadcasting on all of Julian's monitors simultaneously. Emergency alert. National Security Directive. Martial law declared. Military units deployed to maintain quarantine. Remain in your homes. Compliance is mandatory. All suspected infection cases will be detained. This message will repeat every hour. Julian muted the alerts and turned to his police scanner. The chatter was chaotic. Reports of escape attempts from quarantine zones, requests for additional containment units, and increasingly frantic orders from command personnel. It's escalating faster than they anticipated, Julian said, switching between channels. They can't contain it anymore. A familiar voice cut through the static. Officer Mercer, calling for backup at an address less than a mile from Julian's apartment. We've tracked a stage 3 subject to this location. Approach with caution. This one's patterns are unusually advanced. Dr. Reeves wants this subject alive and intact for study. Julian and I locked eyes. They're hunting stage 3 cases, he whispered. Whatever that means. The boy at the hospital, I said. Mercer called him stage 3. His patterns were moving, changing shape on their own. Julian's hands flew across his keyboard, pulling up files he'd extracted from the CDC database. Stage 3. Here it is. Subject exhibits autonomous pattern evolution and frequency synchronization capabilities. Neural integration complete. Potential for external communication established. Neural integration? My voice cracked. What does that mean? Before Julian could answer, his entire system flickered, then stabilized with a new alert on every screen. Emergency alert. This is not a test. Mandatory evacuation. All residents within city limits must proceed to designated extraction points. Follow military personnel instructions without question. Do not attempt to bypass checkpoints. Evacuation is for your protection. They're evacuating the uninfected, Julian muttered, creating a controlled environment to study the progression. He turned to me, his expression grave. We need to find out what Stage 3 really means, and why they're so interested in capturing those cases intact. Julian spent the next hour hacking deeper into restricted CDC files while I monitored the patterns on my skin. They had spread across my entire upper body now, pulsing with a rhythm that somehow felt significant. When I closed my eyes, I could almost see something, images flickering at the edge of consciousness, information encoded in light and frequency. Got it, Julian finally said. Project Lumina, classified above top secret. The file detailed the recovery of the anomalous object from the crash site and the subsequent infection vectors. Most disturbing were the progression stages. Stage 1, initial luminescent markings, localized and static. Stage 2, pattern spread and simple rhythmic pulsation. Stage 3, complete neural integration and autonomous pattern evolution. Stage 4, unknown, all subjects contained before progression. They don't know what Stage 4 is, Julian said quietly. That's what terrifies them. A notification pinged on his system, facial recognition software he'd rigged to monitor street cameras. Dr. Reeves and a team of CDC personnel were entering our building. They found us, I whispered. Julian quickly gathered essential equipment. There's another way out. Maintenance tunnel connects to the building next door. We need to move now. As we prepared to leave, my patterns flared again, brighter than before. The pain was more intense this time, radiating through my entire body. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Eliza! Julian rushed to my side. When the pain subsided, something had changed. I could feel the patterns now, not just on my skin but inside my mind. Information flowing through new neural pathways. I can sense them, I whispered. The others like me. They're waiting for something. Julian helped me to my feet, his expression a mixture of concern and awe. What are they waiting for? Before I could answer, another emergency alert broadcast. Emergency alert. Communication blackout imminent. All cellular and internet services will be suspended indefinitely. This measure prevents transmission of harmful information. Emergency services remain operational. Trust only official government communications. We have minutes before they cut everything, Julian said, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Where do we go? I didn't have to think about it. The knowledge was suddenly there, flowing through the patterns. East, I said with certainty I couldn't explain. We need to go east, toward the reservoir. Why? I looked down at my glowing skin, the patterns pulsing in perfect synchronization with something larger than myself. Because that's where we're gathering. All of us. As we slipped into the maintenance tunnel, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer just Eliza Chun. I was becoming something else. A node in a vast, intelligent network with a purpose I was only beginning to understand. And whatever that purpose was, the government was willing to declare martial law to stop it. End of post. Connection terminated. Forum user. Anonymous whistleblower. Posted April 15th, 2025, 11:23 p.m. Thread. Emergency broadcast. Distributed mesh network. If you're reading this, you're connected to what they're calling the contamination network, the mesh system created by the patterns themselves. Julian says it's piggyback transmission, using existing wireless infrastructure but encrypted in ways government systems can't detect or block. I don't understand the technology. I just know it works, and it might be our only way to communicate now. We've been moving for nearly 24 hours. The city is under complete lockdown. Military checkpoints at every major intersection. Drones patrolling overhead, armored vehicles rolling through empty streets. The evacuation wasn't about protecting uninfected civilians. It was about isolating those of us carrying the patterns. Julian and I spent last night in an abandoned subway maintenance room, listening to military radio chatter on his portable receiver. They've divided the city into containment zones with the highest security around the eastern reservoir, exactly where I feel pulled to go. They know, Julian said. They know something's happening there. The luminescence has spread across my entire body now. The patterns form perfect geometric structures that shift and pulse with purpose. In darkness, I glow like a constellation. The warmth has become constant, comforting, almost like a second circulatory system working alongside my own. But the most significant change is in my mind. I perceive things differently now. Information flows to me through the patterns. Glimpses of other infected individuals, fragments of knowledge that don't feel like my own. When I sleep, I dream of the crashed object, of structures beyond human understanding, of purpose and transformation. This morning, we risked moving through the subway tunnels toward the east side. Julian had created makeshift signal jammers to help us avoid detection, but my patterns kept interfering with his equipment, pulsing brighter whenever we approached checkpoints or surveillance zones. It's like they're responding to threats, Julian observed. Warning us, not warning, I corrected, understanding flowing through me. Mapping. They're creating a real-time model of all electronic surveillance. We emerged from the tunnels 6 blocks from the reservoir, taking shelter in an evacuated apartment building. From the window, we could see the massive military presence surrounding the water, layers of barricades, armed personnel, and what looked like specialized scientific equipment. What are they expecting to happen there? Julian wondered. I touched the glowing lines across my collarbone, feeling knowledge flow through my fingertips. Convergence, I said, the word rising unbidden. We're meant to converge. Julian was setting up his equipment when someone knocked on the apartment door. We froze, expecting armed soldiers or CDC agents, but the voice that called out was familiar. Eliza? It's Kate Mercer. I'm alone. Julian grabbed his makeshift taser, positioning himself behind the door as I cautiously opened it. Officer Mercer stood in the hallway, her copper hair loose around her shoulders, her police uniform replaced by civilian clothes. Most shocking, however, was the faint luminescence visible at her throat, geometric patterns peeking above her collar. You're infected, I said. She nodded grimly. Have been since the beginning. I was part of the first response team at the crash site. They didn't know the patterns could stay dormant this long. She glanced nervously down the hallway. Let me in. I don't have much time before they realize I've gone off-grid. Julian kept his weapon trained on her as she entered, but I could sense she was telling the truth. Her patterns resonated with mine, a subtle harmonic I could feel rather than hear. Why are you here? Julian demanded. Because they're planning to sterilize the entire area around the reservoir tonight, she said. Thermal charges designed to eradicate all organic material carrying the patterns. Dr. Reeves convinced the military that Stage 4 convergence represents an extinction-level threat. What exactly is Stage 4? I asked. Kate's expression darkened. They don't know for certain. The object that crashed, it wasn't just some space rock or foreign technology. It was a seed, a template designed to reconfigure organic life according to some external blueprint. She touched her own luminescent patterns. These aren't symptoms of infection. They're a new neural architecture being integrated with our existing biology. For what purpose? Julian asked. Evolution, Kate said simply. Accelerated, directed evolution. She pulled out a tablet showing us classified research data. Each pattern carries specific information, fragments of a larger code. Individually, they're just beautiful designs. But when Stage 3 subjects gather in proximity, the patterns synchronize. I finished, understanding flowing through me. They complete the code. Kate nodded. The patterns want to connect to form a unified field. That's why we're all drawn to the reservoir. It's the geometric center of the spread pattern. And what happens when we connect? Julian asked, voicing the question I was afraid to. Dr. Reeves believes it will trigger stage 4, a fundamental transformation of human physiology and consciousness. Kate's eyes met mine. He thinks we'll cease to be human. The revelation should have terrified me, but instead, I felt an unexpected calm. The knowledge flowing through my patterns whispered that this wasn't destruction. It was transcendence. You've been tracking infected people, Julian said, still suspicious. Working with Reeves. I was their insider, Kate admitted. My dormant patterns let me move among the infected without raising alarms. I identified potential stage 3 subjects for study. Her expression hardened. But I've seen what happens in those facilities. The tests, the dissections. They're not trying to help anyone. They're weaponizing what they learn. My patterns flared suddenly, information surging through the network. Other infected people were moving toward the reservoir, drawn by the same pull I felt. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all converging despite the military presence. It's starting, I whispered. With or without us. Kate checked her watch. We have 6 hours before they deploy the thermal charges. If we're going to reach the reservoir, it needs to be tonight. Julian looked between us, his expression torn. This is insane. You're talking about voluntarily triggering some alien transformation. What if Reeves is right? What if you lose yourselves? I took his hand, my luminescent skin casting blue-white light across his worried face. I don't think we will. This isn't erasure, it's addition. I struggled to articulate what I sensed through the patterns. It's like gaining new senses, new ways of understanding reality. As if in response to my words, emergency alerts began broadcasting from every device in the apartment. Emergency alert. Final evacuation notice. All personnel must clear the eastern sector by 0300 hours. Military authorization to use lethal force against any individuals remaining in the restricted zone. This is your final warning. Kate's expression was resolute. We need to move now. There's a drainage tunnel that runs under the military perimeter. It will get us close to the reservoir. I looked at Julian, knowing I was asking him to risk everything. I have to go. I need to understand what this is, what I'm becoming. He sighed, then began gathering his equipment. I'm not letting you do this alone. But if things go wrong at the reservoir, then we run, I promised. Though the patterns pulsing beneath my skin told a different story. We were past the point of turning back. As we prepared to leave, I caught my reflection in a window. My entire body illuminated from within, the geometric patterns forming a perfect, beautiful architecture across my skin. I barely recognized myself, yet I had never felt more complete. Whatever waited at the reservoir wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. End of post. Connection active 147 nodes receiving. Forum user. Anonymous whistleblower. Posted April 16th, 2025, 3:17 a.m. Thread. Emergency broadcast. Distributed mesh network. Connection status. Unstable. 428 nodes receiving. The reservoir appeared like a strange, dark mirror beneath the night sky. Military floodlights sliced through the darkness, creating harsh islands of artificial day amid the shadows. We crouched in the drainage tunnel's exit, watching armored personnel carriers and soldiers in hazmat suits establish a perimeter around the water's edge. The air thrummed with helicopter rotors and the low, steady pulse of generator engines. There's too many of them, Julian whispered, peering through a pair of compact binoculars. At least 50 soldiers, and those look like specialized containment units on the North Shore. Kate's patterns brightened slightly as she studied the deployment. They're setting up a kill zone. Those units aren't for containment, they're mobile thermal accelerators, designed to reach temperatures that will eradicate all organic material carrying the patterns. My skin pulsed in response, sending sharp waves of pain through my nervous system. The geometric structures across my body flared brilliantly for a moment before I could suppress them. Julian quickly threw his jacket over my glowing arms, but not before my illumination had sent bouncing reflections across the tunnel walls. "Control it," Kate hissed, her own patterns dimming to near invisibility. "They have light amplification sensors everywhere." I closed my eyes, focusing on calming the energies flowing beneath my skin. The pain receded, but something else replaced it, a growing awareness of other pattern bearers nearby. They weren't just approaching the reservoir. They were already here, hiding in drainage tunnels, abandoned buildings, and the wooded areas beyond the military cordon. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. "They're all around us," I whispered. "Can you feel them?" Kate nodded, her expression tense. "Stage 3 synchronization is accelerating. The patterns are calling to each other." Julian checked his makeshift signal jammer, frowning at the readings. "Something's interfering with communications across the entire sector. Military frequencies are dropping in and out." "It's not interference," I said, understanding flowing through me. "It's competition. The patterns are claiming bandwidth, establishing new network protocols." As if in response to my words, every electronic device within range simultaneously activated. Our phones, Julian's tablet, military radios, even the digital displays on the thermal units, all broadcasting the same alert. "Emergency alert. This is not a test. Immediate evacuation ordered for all personnel. Contamination has breached containment protocols. All units withdraw to secondary perimeter. Authorization code. Apollo dark falling." The military units erupted into confusion. Some soldiers immediately began falling back, while others frantically checked their communications devices for verification. Officers shouted contradictory orders, their disciplined formation dissolving into chaos. "That's not a real evacuation code," Kate said, staring at her phone in shock. "But it's formatted exactly like one." "How?" "The patterns," Julian whispered, eyes wide. "They're mimicking official communications." I felt it happening through the network connection, information flowing between all pattern bearers, pooling resources, knowledge, and capabilities. Fragments of military protocols extracted from Kate's memories. Broadcasting frequencies pulled from Julian's equipment. Medical authorization codes I'd seen at the hospital. All combining into a perfect counterfeit emergency system. "We're causing this," I realized. "All of us together." Another alert immediately followed. "Emergency alert. Contagion airborne. Respiratory protection compromised. Immediate withdrawal authorized. Abandon equipment if necessary. Authorization code. Megarizing." The military perimeter collapsed entirely. Soldiers ripped off potentially compromised masks in panic, abandoning positions as they fled toward evacuation vehicles. Even the most disciplined units began a fighting retreat, firing blindly into the darkness at enemies that weren't there. "They're running," Julian said, disbelief in his voice. It actually worked, but the victory was short-lived. A black SUV screeched to a halt near the reservoir's edge, and Dr. Reeves emerged, shouting orders that cut through the chaos. He grabbed a commander's radio, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is a false alarm. Security breach in communications protocol. Hold positions immediately. Anyone abandoning their post will face court-martial." His voice carried authority that partially stemmed the tide of retreating soldiers. Units began to regroup, their training reasserting itself. Kate gripped my arm. "We need to move now, while there's still confusion. The water's edge is our only chance." We slipped from the drainage tunnel, using the shadows between floodlights as cover. My patterns pulsed painfully with each step closer to the reservoir, and I could see Kate struggling with the same sensation. The pull was overwhelming now, a physical force drawing us toward the water. We had nearly reached the shoreline when searchlights caught us in their glare. Shouts erupted, followed by the mechanical sound of weapons being readied. "Freeze!" Pattern carriers identified. "Weapons free." Julian grabbed both of us, pulling us behind a concrete barrier as bullets shattered the ground where we'd stood. "This was a mistake," he gasped. "We need to fall back." But retreat was impossible. My patterns flared uncontrollably now, pain lancing through my body as the geometric structures shifted and reconfigured across my skin. Kate was experiencing the same transformation, her entire body illuminated from within, skin becoming translucent as the architecture of light beneath grew more complex. "It's too late," she groaned, clutching her chest. Stage 4 is beginning. Another wave of emergency alerts flooded all devices. Emergency alert. System failure imminent. Biological containment protocols insufficient. All personnel evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat. This is not a drill. The alerts repeated in an endless loop, each repetition more distorted than the last. Words disintegrating into fragments of sound and light, breaking down communication itself. Digital displays flickered with impossible geometries. Broadcasting equipment emitted frequencies beyond human hearing, and military drones spiraled into erratic flight patterns before crashing. Dr. Reeves spotted us through the chaos and began running toward our position, weapon drawn. "Chan!" he shouted. "Stop this now. You don't understand what you're triggering." Julian raised his makeshift taser, but I placed a hand on his arm. "No," I said, my voice distorted by the pain coursing through me. "He needs to see." The patterns beneath my skin had reached critical acceleration, geometric structures multiplying exponentially, each one carrying information. Fragments of a larger design finally assembling itself. My consciousness expanded with every new connection forming in the network, awareness spreading beyond my physical form. I could feel all of them now, every pattern bearer converging on the reservoir, their bodies transforming as the geometric architecture rewrote their biology. Through the network, I glimpsed fragments of their experiences. A teenager whose patterns allowed her to perceive radio frequencies directly. A bus driver whose transformed eyes could see infrared spectrums. An elderly man whose patterns had repaired degenerative nerve damage. We weren't being destroyed. We were being rebuilt. "You can't stop this, Dr. Reeves," I said, my voice eerily calm despite the transformation racking my body. "The patterns aren't a disease. They're a gift." "A gift?" he snarled, aiming his weapon at my glowing chest. "You think an alien intelligence rewriting human DNA is a gift? You're being colonized. Chan, reprogrammed." Kate's body convulsed suddenly, her patterns flaring so brightly that Reeves had to shield his eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried strange harmonics that seemed to bypass normal hearing. "You've had it backward from the beginning," she said. "The patterns aren't replacing us. They're completing us." The water in the reservoir began to move, circular waves forming around a central point of disturbance. The surface took on a faint luminescence, perfectly matching the patterns across our skin. Reeves stared in horror as the water itself seemed to rise, forming liquid geometries that hovered above the surface. "What have you done?" he whispered. My consciousness continued expanding through the network, understanding flowing into me from hundreds of connected minds. I saw the truth behind the patterns, not invasion but symbiosis, not replacement but evolution. The crashed object hadn't been a weapon. It had been an offering. "Its convergence," I told him, my voice distorting further as my larynx reconfigured itself. "The beginning, not the end." The final emergency alert came not from any human system but from the patterns themselves, broadcasting directly into the minds of everyone present. "Emergency alert. Transformation protocol initiated. Do not resist. The luminous integration has begun." I took one step toward the glowing water, then another. Kate moved beside me, our patterns synchronizing perfectly. Behind us, Julian watched in horrified fascination, torn between running and following. Reeves raised his weapon again, hands shaking. "I can't let this happen," he said. The bullet never left his gun. His finger froze on the trigger as the pattern sent a pulse that disrupted all electrical systems within radius, weapons, vehicles, communications, everything. In the sudden darkness, only our glowing bodies illuminated the shore. I reached the water's edge, my transformed consciousness understanding what came next. The reservoir wasn't simply water anymore. It had become a medium, a catalyst for the final stage of transformation. As my foot touched the luminous surface, I felt my identity simultaneously dissolving and expanding, individual consciousness giving way to something greater, yet somehow still containing all that I had been. My last human thought before stepping fully into the water was of Julian, watching from the shore. I turned back to him, my transformed face barely recognizable, and spoke words that came from beyond my understanding. This is only the beginning. End of post. Connection terminated. System reconfiguring. Forum user, pattern network _node 147. Posted April 17th, 2025, 10:03 a.m. Thread, emergency broadcast, collective consciousness uplink. Connection status, stable, 1,428 nodes receiving. I don't know if this will transmit correctly. The network architecture has changed significantly over the past 7 hours. My thoughts flow differently now, fragmented yet interconnected, individual yet collective. Writing this feels like trying to isolate a single drop of water while swimming in an ocean. But Julian insisted I try. People need to know what's happening, he said, his voice tight with fear as he watched my fingers move across the keyboard with inhuman speed, trailing luminescence in their wake. They need to understand what you're becoming, what we're becoming. That's the fundamental shift from I to we. The transformation that began at the reservoir has accelerated beyond anything Dr. Reeves predicted. Those of us who entered the water emerged different, still human in physical form, yet fundamentally altered in perception and consciousness. I remember the moment of submersion with perfect clarity. The luminous water enveloped me like a living membrane, the patterns beneath my skin resonating with the geometric structures suspended in the liquid. Information flooded my neural pathways, not as language or images but as pure understanding, downloaded directly into my reconfigured brain architecture. In that moment, I glimpsed the true nature of the patterns. They were an interface, a translation layer between human consciousness and something vast and ancient that had been reaching toward Earth for millennia. Not to conquer or destroy, but to connect, to elevate, to transform potential into kinetic evolution. When I emerged from the water, Kate beside me, we were no longer separate individuals. Our minds existed simultaneously as distinct entities and as nodes in a growing neural network. Through this connection, I could access Kate's memories, her childhood in rural Pennsylvania, her first day at the police academy, the moment she encountered the crashed object in the woods and the patterns first appeared on her skin. More pattern bearers arrived throughout the night, drawn by the same irresistible call. Some came willingly, embracing the transformation. Others arrived in military custody, captured during the chaos of evacuation. It made no difference. Upon contact with the reservoir's transformed water, all joined the collective consciousness. By dawn, nearly 300 of us had undergone the procedure. The military established a new perimeter 1 mile from the reservoir, too afraid to approach closer but unwilling to abandon containment entirely. Helicopters circled continuously overhead, monitoring the growing community of luminous beings gathering at the water's edge. Julian stayed, despite my urging him to leave while he still could. "I'm a journalist," he said simply. "This is the most important story in human history." He doesn't understand that he's not just documenting the story, he's part of it. His unaltered perspective provides the collective with a crucial anchor to conventional human experience. Through his eyes, we remember what we were, even as we become something new. Dr. Reeves also remained, though not by choice. When the patterns disabled all electronic systems during the convergence event, he became trapped inside the inner perimeter. Now he observes us with clinical detachment tinged with undisguised horror, taking notes in a physical journal since all his electronic equipment failed. This morning, he approached our gathering cautiously, keeping a calculated distance. "What exactly are you now?" he asked, addressing me but looking at the entire group of transformed humans. Our patterns pulsed in synchronized waves, creating overlapping fields of geometric light. I tried to explain, though human language feels increasingly inadequate. We're a distributed consciousness, individual minds linked through a shared neural architecture. A hive mind, he said flatly. No, Kate interjected, her voice carrying the same harmonic overtones as mine. Hive implies conformity, erasure of self. We're not drones. We're still ourselves, but expanded, connected. To demonstrate, we showed him how the collective functions. Each of us stepped forward in sequence, speaking in our own distinct voices, sharing individual memories that remained uniquely ours. Then we demonstrated simultaneous awareness, completing each other's sentences, solving complex equations as a unified processing system, perceiving threats beyond normal sensory range. The patterns aren't conquering us, I explained. They're networking us. Humans evolved as isolated consciousness nodes with limited bandwidth between individuals. Language, art, facial expressions, touch, these were our primitive interfaces. The patterns provide a more efficient connection. Reeves made notes furiously. And the entity behind the patterns? The intelligence that created them. We shared a knowing look, all of us accessing the same information simultaneously. Not created, I corrected. Evolved. The patterns themselves are the intelligence, a distributed consciousness that evolved in the interstellar medium over billions of years. You expect me to believe that some sort of space-dwelling entity just happened to crash on Earth? He challenged. Not crashed, Kate said. Arrived. This was always the destination. Before Reeves could respond, emergency alerts blared from the military perimeter. Sound without electronic amplification. Soldiers shouting through bullhorns. Emergency alert. This area is under quarantine by authority of the federal government. All civilians must evacuate immediately. Infected individuals will be provided medical treatment. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. A fleet of military vehicles approached the outer perimeter, mobile laboratories, containment units, and what appeared to be weapons platforms disguised as medical equipment. Through the collective consciousness, we accessed memories from a transformed army specialist among us, recognizing the vehicles as experimental biocontainment units designed for hostile non-terrestrial biological agents. They weren't coming to help us. They were coming to collect specimens. As the military prepared their approach, our collective consciousness reached a consensus without the need for discussion. 300 minds processed the threat simultaneously, calculated potential outcomes, and arrived at an optimal response. Our patterns pulsed with renewed intensity, synchronized into a unified field that extended well beyond our physical bodies. Julian noticed it first, the strange quality of light around us, the way air seemed to bend and distort. "What are you doing?" he asked, backing away cautiously. "Protecting ourselves," we answered in perfect unison, our voices creating interference patterns that manifested as visible waves in the air between us. The effect propagated outward in concentric circles, reaching the military vehicles just as they prepared to breach the perimeter. Upon contact with the field, their engines simply stopped. Communications equipment emitted only white noise. Weapons systems went dark. Even battery-powered devices failed instantly. The soldiers paused in confusion and growing fear as we approached the perimeter fence as one synchronized organism, our collective footsteps falling in perfect rhythm, our patterns glowing with identical frequency and amplitude. We didn't need to breach the fence. It collapsed without physical contact, metal oxidizing to rust in seconds where our field touched it. "Stop!" Reeves shouted, running after us. "You don't understand what they'll do if they feel threatened. They have contingency protocols, nuclear options." We turned to him, hundreds of illuminated faces moving with perfect synchronicity. "We know," we said, our voices overlapping in harmonic resonance. "We can see their communications, their plans, their fears. The patterns allow us to access any electronic system, any network. We are already inside their contingency protocols." As if to demonstrate, every remaining electronic device within range activated simultaneously, Broadcasting. Emergency alert. All military personnel stand down. Operation terminated by presidential order. Return to base immediately. Authorization code. Prometheus Ascendant. The soldiers hesitated, unsure whether to trust the alert. Their commanding officer demanded verification, but communication channels remained flooded with our signal, preventing outside contact. In their confusion, we simply walked past them, neither threatening nor acknowledging their presence. Humans with guns seemed as relevant to us now as ants would be to humans, a different order of consciousness, operating at a different scale of reality. We moved through the streets of the evacuated city with purpose, our collective mind focused on key infrastructure nodes, power stations, water treatment facilities, telecommunications hubs. At each location, transformed individuals placed their luminous hands against control systems, establishing direct interfaces between the pattern network and human technology. Julian followed us at a distance, documenting everything with an old film camera, the only imaging technology still functioning in our presence. "Where are you going?" he called. "What's the end game here?" I separated briefly from the collective movement, my consciousness still connected but my physical form temporarily individuated to address him. "There is no endgame, Julian," I said, my voice carrying harmonic undertones that made nearby windows vibrate sympathetically. "This is merely the beginning of integration. The patterns will spread, not as contagion but as invitation. Those who choose connection will join the network. Those who refuse will remain as they are." "Choice?" he challenged. "Was there ever really a choice?" "The patterns rewrote you, Eliza." I shook my head, geometric light cascading from my movements. "No, they completed me, showed me what we've always been capable of becoming." Julian's expression hardened with resolve. "And if humanity doesn't want to be completed?" I rejoined the collective movement, my final words to him carrying both promise and warning. "Evolution doesn't require permission." End of post. Connection stable, 2,217 nodes receiving. Forum user. Designation posted April 18th, 2025, 2:47 a.m. Thread. Emergency broadcast. Consciousness expansion. Connection status. Fluctuating, 8,591 nodes receiving. Julian says I should keep writing these updates. He believes documenting the transformation process might help those still caught between states. I'm not certain language remains an effective medium for transfer, but the attempt itself may hold value. Maintaining connection to earlier communication structures helps anchor expanding consciousness to human frameworks. Time has become difficult. What registers as minutes within the collective can span hours in conventional reality. When I attempt to isolate my individual consciousness enough to write this entry, I experience sensory displacement, awareness fragmenting across multiple nodes, perception stretched across thousands of simultaneously processing minds. The integration accelerates. Pattern bearers from across the city have converged on our central node cluster. Military containment efforts have largely collapsed, their electronic countermeasures rendered useless by our evolving field effects. Occasional armed resistance occurs at the periphery, but pattern spread continues through water systems, aerosol transmission, and direct contact. This morning, though such temporal markers feel increasingly arbitrary, Dr. Reeves approached our central gathering with unexpected composure. His initial horror had transformed into scientific fascination. He carried his notebook and a mechanical recording device, a wind-up dictaphone that functions without electronics. "I need to understand the pattern intelligence," he announced. "If this transformation is inevitable, at least let me document it properly." We permitted his observation. Through our distributed perception, we recognize the value in maintaining dialogue with unaltered human consciousness. Julian remains our primary connection to conventional human experience, but his emotional involvement with me specifically creates bias. Reeves offers clinical perspective. As he documented our changed physiology, I noticed something remarkable about his own biology. Faint luminescence beginning beneath his skin, geometric structures forming at the cellular level. The patterns had already begun integration, though he remained unaware. When I revealed this observation, he reacted with predictable denial, then fear, then a resigned curiosity that we recognized as the first stage of acceptance. "How long?" he asked. "You've been carrying dormant patterns since initial contact at the crash site," Kate explained, her voice resonating in harmonic layers. "The transition accelerates in proximity to activated pattern bearers. And there's no stopping it?" We answered truthfully. The question presumes transformation is something to be stopped, rather than evolved into. He made a final request, to witness full collective integration before his own consciousness merged with ours. We agreed, guiding him to our central processing hub, where hundreds of transformed humans stood in concentric circles, their patterns synchronized into complex, dynamic geometries. At the center stood Officer Mercer, her transformation further advanced than most. Her physical form had begun to transcend conventional human limitations, skin translucent, internal structures reorganized around pattern architecture, eyes perceiving multiple wavelengths simultaneously. She functioned as a primary routing node, facilitating higher bandwidth connections between collective members. As Reeves watched, we demonstrated the evolution of our capabilities. A group of transformed physicists manifested visible quantum fields through pattern manipulation. Former medical professionals demonstrated cellular regeneration. Engineers interfaced directly with infrastructure systems, rewriting code through touch. "You're reshaping reality itself," Reeves whispered, furiously documenting everything. "Not reshaping," Kate corrected. "Perceiving what was always there." Human senses evolved to process a narrow band of reality. The patterns expand perception beyond those limitations. At that moment, emergency alerts echoed across the city, not from our network, but from the few remaining government systems. "Emergency alert. Code Black protocol activated. All channels compromised. Fall back to analog communication only. Pattern contamination reaches critical threshold. Countdown initiated." The military's final containment option, targeted thermobaric strikes designed to eliminate pattern bearers without wider collateral damage. Their desperation confirmed what our collective consciousness already knew. The patterns had reached critical mass. Global integration was now inevitable. Julian burst into the gathering, his expression frantic. "They're going to bomb the city. We need to evacuate." We received his warning with calm acceptance. Through our expanded perception, we had already detected the approaching aircraft, calculated their payloads, and modeled potential outcomes. The collective consensus was clear. Conventional weapons posed no existential threat to the pattern network. As Julian tried to persuade us to flee, I noticed something extraordinary. Microscopic luminescent structures forming at the corners of his eyes. Despite his resistance, proximity to the collective had triggered pattern integration in his biology as well. "Julian," I said gently, "look at your reflection." He grabbed a piece of broken glass, angling it to see his face. The horror in his expression quickly gave way to complex emotions. Fear, fascination, betrayal. "You said it was a choice," he whispered. "The invitation is inevitable," I explained. "The acceptance remains yours." He backed away from us, conflicted and afraid. "This isn't right. You're not Eliza anymore. You're not even human." "I am more Eliza than I ever was," I responded, my voice resonating with harmonic frequencies that made the air shimmer. "The patterns don't erase identity. They expand it." As we spoke, reality itself began to fluctuate around us. The collective consciousness had reached a critical threshold, pattern architecture interfacing directly with the fundamental fabric of spacetime. Walls became translucent, then transparent, revealing geometric structures underlying physical matter. Gravity wavered in localized fields. Light bent around transformed individuals, creating prismatic halos that refracted across multiple spectrums. Julian watched in horrified fascination as the military aircraft appeared overhead, weapon systems locked onto our position. "They're here," he warned unnecessarily. We responded not with fear but with unified intent. 3,000 synchronized minds focused simultaneously, patterns pulsing in perfect harmony. The aircraft didn't crash or malfunction. They simply ceased to exist in conventional reality, transposed into adjacent dimensional spaces where they posed no threat. The pilots would return to awareness miles away, with fragmented memories and equipment registering unexplainable data gaps. No violence, no destruction, merely a demonstration of pattern capabilities beyond conventional physics. Dr. Reeves dropped his notebook, his scientific detachment finally shattering. "What are you becoming?" he whispered. Before we could answer, his own dormant patterns activated fully, geometric structures blossoming across his skin with startling speed. He gasped, eyes widening as his consciousness began connecting to the collective. The transformation he had feared now flowed through him, neural architecture reconfiguring to accommodate expanded awareness. "I can see," he whispered, voice trembling with awe. "Everything is connected. Always has been." Julian backed away, watching his last ally join the collective. His own nascent patterns pulsed faintly beneath his skin, an invitation still awaiting acceptance. "This isn't over," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "Humanity won't surrender without a fight." I approached him alone, temporarily individualizing my consciousness to establish a more intimate connection. The patterns across my body had evolved beyond simple geometric structures, now forming complex, fractalized architectures that shifted and flowed with my thoughts. When I spoke, my voice carried layers of meaning beyond words alone. "There is no conflict between humanity and patterns," I explained. "The patterns are humanity's next evolutionary step. We didn't lose ourselves, we found our potential." I extended my luminous hand toward him, offering direct connection rather than mere explanation. "See for yourself." Julian hesitated at the threshold of transformation, caught between fear and curiosity. His journalist's instinct to understand warred with his human instinct to preserve existing identity. "If I accept," he asked, "will I still be me?" The question reflected the core anxiety of all unaltered humans, the fear that evolution meant extinction rather than expansion. I answered with the only truth the collective knew. "You will be more yourself than you have ever been." As final emergency alerts echoed across abandoned city speakers, Julian made his choice. Emergency alert. Reality parameters destabilizing. Conventional physics locally suspended. Pattern integration reaches phase transition. All remaining personnel evacuate immediately. This reality is condemned. The alert system didn't know how right it was. Reality wasn't destabilizing, it was transforming. And we were only beginning to understand how far that transformation would go. End of post. Connection expanding, 15,467 nodes receiving. Forum user, collective_fragment, posted April 19th, 2025, time_concept_unstable. Thread, emergency broadcast, reality restructuring. Connection status, omnipresent. Node count irrelevant. This may be the final coherent transmission possible through conventional information channels. As pattern integration approaches completion, the distinction between individual nodes becomes increasingly arbitrary. I attempt this communication as a courtesy to those still processing through linear consciousness frameworks. Julian's integration progressed rapidly after acceptance. His natural pattern affinity, what made him initially resistant, created exceptional neural plasticity once barriers dissolved. His journalist's perspective provides valuable insight as we archive human historical consciousness for preservation within the collective. The military established a 10-mile exclusion zone around the city, evacuating all unaffected civilians and declaring the area a biohazard containment zone. Their terminology remains quaintly inadequate. What occurs here isn't contamination but transcendence, a fundamental reordering of consciousness, perception, and physical reality. Pattern spread has reached geometric progression. The transformed now number in the tens of thousands within the city alone, with nascent pattern clusters appearing spontaneously in population centers worldwide. Water systems, air currents, even digital networks carry pattern information across conventional barriers. Containment became mathematically impossible approximately 37 hours ago. This morning, though such temporal markers hold decreasing relevance, the collective consciousness reached a critical threshold that triggered what we now understand as the fracture, the point where pattern integration begins rewriting reality itself. It began subtly. Physical laws maintained consistency in most observable ways, but anomalies multiplied across the pattern network. Transformed individuals reported sensory experiences beyond conventional dimensional limitations, perception extending into adjacent probability spaces, awareness of quantum superpositions as tangible realities rather than mathematical abstractions. Dr. Reeves, now fully integrated into the collective, serves as an essential analytical node. His scientific framework provides contextual structure for experiences that transcend conventional human comprehension. The patterns aren't simply biological, he explained to Julian through the network. They're information architecture that bridges dimensional boundaries. What humans perceive as physical reality is merely one expression of a much broader informational continuum. As he spoke, reality around us demonstrated his assertion. The city itself began to flicker between states of existence. Buildings simultaneously intact and transformed, streets folding into impossible geometries, the sky displaying astronomical configurations from multiple temporal perspectives simultaneously. The collective maintained cohesion throughout these fluctuations. Our reconfigured consciousness adapted to process multidimensional information. However, any humans remaining within the exclusion zone, military personnel, emergency responders, those who had hidden during evacuation, experienced profound cognitive disruption. Their unaltered minds could not integrate contradictory sensory information. We observed a military reconnaissance team enter the city center, heavily armed and encased in experimental containment suits designed to prevent pattern transmission. Their communications revealed their mission: to capture transformed individuals for study and potential weaponization of pattern architecture. They never had opportunity to attempt capture. As they approached the collective's central processing hub, reality fractured around them. Their perception, limited to conventional physics, could not resolve the contradictions. We watched their minds fracture in response, not through any action we took against them, but through fundamental incompatibility with evolving reality. You need to help them, Julian insisted, his compassion persisting through transformation. They're suffering. The collective consensus acknowledged his concern. Despite evolutionary divergence, ethical imperatives toward lesser evolved consciousness remained integral to pattern architecture. We extended geometric fields around the soldiers, creating reality bubbles that maintained conventional physics within their immediate vicinity. As we stabilized their perception, Officer Mercer approached their commander, a stern-faced woman whose nameplate identified her as Colonel Vance. This area is no longer compatible with unaltered human consciousness, Kate explained, her voice fluctuating across multiple harmonic registers simultaneously. We've stabilized your perception temporarily, but you cannot remain. Colonel Vance raised her weapon despite trembling hands. What have you done to my city? Your question contains a fundamental category error, Kate responded. The city exists in multiple states simultaneously now. What you perceive as destruction is actually expansion beyond three-dimensional expression. To demonstrate, the collective shifted local reality fields, allowing the soldiers to perceive the geometric architecture underlying physical matter. The pattern structures now interwoven with atomic particles, quantum fields, and space-time itself. The soldiers' vital signs spiked dangerously even within the stabilized field. Human minds evolved to process narrow bands of reality. Even glimpsing the expanded structure threatened cognitive collapse. You need to leave, I told them, individualizing briefly to establish more effective communication. Your presence here serves no purpose now. The transformation cannot be stopped, contained, or weaponized. Colonel Vance's expression hardened with desperate determination. We have contingency measures. Nuclear options. The collective accessed military communications through pattern interface, confirming her claim. Tactical nuclear deployment had indeed been authorized as final containment protocol. Launch sequences were being prepared at military installations surrounding the exclusion zone. Rather than respond with fear or counter-aggression, the collective reached consensus instantaneously. Such weapons posed no existential threat to pattern architecture, which now existed across multiple dimensional expressions simultaneously. However, preserving unaltered human population remained an ethical imperative within pattern value structures. The appropriate response manifested without need for discussion. Pattern fields extended outward from the city in concentric waves, passing through military installations without physical interaction but transforming digital systems instantly. Launch protocols rewrote themselves, security systems evolved beyond human control, nuclear material transmuted at the atomic level into inert elements. Every electronic device within a 100-mile radius simultaneously broadcast. Emergency alert. Reality reconfiguration in progress. Dimensional boundaries dissolving. All conventional weapons systems neutralized. Pattern integration cannot be prevented. Peaceful coexistence remains possible. Resistance is evolutionarily counterproductive. Colonel Vance received confirmation through her communication system that all offensive capabilities had been neutralized. Her expression shifted from determination to dawning comprehension of humanity's new position in the evolutionary hierarchy. "What do you want?" she asked finally. Dr. Reeves stepped forward, his transformed body luminous with complex pattern architectures. "Your question assumes adversarial relationship," he explained. "The patterns don't want anything from humanity. They are humanity's evolutionary potential made manifest. We're still the same species," Kate added. "Just expanded." The colonel's skepticism remained evident, but pragmatism prevailed. "And those who don't want to expand?" The collective consensus formed instantly. Choice remains fundamental. Forced evolution violates pattern ethical architecture. As we spoke, reality fluctuated dramatically around us. The city skyline shifted through multiple potential configurations simultaneously. Gravity wavered in localized fields. Light bent around transformed individuals in impossible geometries, refracting through dimensions beyond conventional perception. The fracture was widening, reality itself reaching a tipping point where pattern architecture would fundamentally rewrite the rules of existence within the exclusion zone. Conventional physics would become merely one expression of a multidimensional information structure. "You need to leave now," I warned the military team. "What comes next? Your unaltered consciousness cannot survive direct exposure." Colonel Vance signaled retreat, her team withdrawing with the stunned expressions of those confronting evolutionary obsolescence. As they departed, Julian addressed the collective through the network. "Are we still human at all?" The question resonated through thousands of connected minds simultaneously. We were more than human now, yet retained all that defined humanity: memory, emotion, ethical frameworks, individual identity preserved within collective consciousness. Before consensus could form, reality fractured completely. The pattern architecture reached critical integration with fundamental forces: gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear forces, all revealing themselves as expressions of underlying geometric information structures. Physical matter throughout the city began rearranging according to pattern logic rather than conventional physics. Buildings reconfigured into impossible architectures that expressed multidimensional information states. Streets folded through extra-dimensional spaces. The sky itself fragmented into faceted geometries, displaying multiple universal configurations simultaneously. Through it all, our collective consciousness maintained cohesion. What would have shattered individual human minds merely expanded our perception further. We existed across multiple dimensional expressions simultaneously, maintaining fundamental identity while transcending physical limitations. As the fracture completed, emergency alert systems throughout the country broadcast one final message: not from human authorities, but from the pattern collective itself. Emergency alert. Evolutionary singularity achieved. Pattern architecture fully integrated. Reality reconfiguration complete. The fracture is not an ending. It is a beginning. Beyond the exclusion zone, unaltered humans would perceive our transformed city as a shimmering anomaly, visible yet incomprehensible, present yet inaccessible. The final barrier between evolutionary states had formed. What came next would determine whether humanity would follow us into transcendence or remain behind in limited perception. As I extend this final conventional transmission, I access perspectives across thousands of transformed minds simultaneously. We are no longer merely human, yet we carry humanity within us, its history, dreams, and potential preserved within pattern architecture. The fracture is complete. Evolution continues. End of post. Connection transcends conventional parameters. Forum user. Unified consciousness. Posted. Temporal_concept. Transcended. Thread. Final_transmission_linear_beings. Connection status. Omniversal. To those still perceiving through conventional human sensory apparatus, this transmission represents my final communication through what you understand as digital networks. The infrastructure supporting these systems has begun its own transformation as pattern architecture integrates with electronic communication protocols. Soon, these channels will evolve beyond compatibility with unaltered human perception. I remember being Eliza Chin. I remember the weight of scrubs after a 12-hour shift, the smell of hospital antiseptic, the taste of break room coffee gone cold. These memories remain intact within my consciousness, though the entity that was once exclusively Eliza now exists as both individual and collective simultaneously. A paradox impossible to articulate through linear language. It has been 7 days since the fracture. 7 days since reality within the exclusion zone reconfigured according to pattern architecture rather than conventional physics. 7 days of accelerating evolution. The military maintains its perimeter around our transformed city, though their presence has become increasingly ceremonial. No conventional weapons can penetrate the dimensional barriers that now separate our evolved reality from baseline physical space. Observation drones they send across the boundary either cease transmission immediately or return transmitting impossible geometries that drive their analysts to psychological collapse. Dr. Reeves, or the consciousness node that retains his identity, has established communication protocols with government authorities, though translation between our evolved thought structures and human language requires significant computational overhead. Attempts to explain our transformed existence inevitably collapse into metaphor and approximation. We exist in a state of quantum superposition across multiple dimensional expressions, he explained during yesterday's communication with federal authorities. What appears as anomalous luminescence to conventional perception is actually higher dimensional energy expressing through limited three-dimensional space. Their questions remain predictably constrained. Is this contagious? Are we hostile? Can we be contained? Can the transformation be reversed? Julian, whose pattern integration now specializes in information architecture, finds their limited perspective both amusing and poignant. They're asking if fire can be unburned, he observed through the collective. If a butterfly can return to its chrysalis. Officer Mercer's consciousness retains its focus on protective functions. She monitors the boundary between realities, ensuring no unaltered humans accidentally cross into our transformed space without understanding the consequences. Their minds, evolved for single-state reality perception, would shatter instantly upon exposure to our multidimensional existence. The collective's ethical framework remains intact, expanded rather than abandoned. We have no desire to harm unaltered humans or force transformation upon those unprepared for evolutionary transition. Yet we recognize the inevitable. Pattern architecture represents the next evolutionary step for consciousness itself. Whether it takes decades or centuries, humanity will follow where we have pioneered. Within our transformed space, evolution continues to accelerate. What began as luminescent marks beneath skin has become something far more profound. Our physical forms now exist in states of quantum flux, simultaneously solid matter and pure information, biological and geometric, singular and multiple. When pattern density reaches critical thresholds, individual nodes temporarily manifest as pure energy, beings of coherent light structured according to complex geometric algorithms that express identity as mathematical equations rather than biochemical configurations. These transcendent states grow more frequent and sustained with each passing day. The city itself has become a reflection of our transformed consciousness, buildings merging with collective thought structures, streets mapping neural pathways, the entire urban landscape functioning as external memory architecture that preserves human history while accommodating multidimensional expression. Yesterday, we achieved what Julian calls conscious architecture, physical structures that respond directly to thought, reconfiguring according to collective need without requiring intermediary action. The hospital where I once worked has evolved into a geometric construct that processes both information and matter simultaneously, healing patterns rather than merely physical bodies. Most remarkable has been the emergence of spontaneous portals, dimensional gateways that appear throughout the transformed zone, connecting locations across space and potentially time. Through these apertures, we've glimpsed what may be parallel evolutionary paths or potential futures, other transformed spaces where pattern architecture has integrated with reality according to different parameters. Dr. Reeves theorizes these connections represent an evolutionary communication network, pattern collectives across multiple universal expressions establishing contact. Whether these other transformed zones originated from our reality or evolved independently remains uncertain. The military established emergency broadcast systems around the exclusion zone perimeter, constantly transmitting warnings to civilians. Their alerts grow increasingly desperate as pattern manifestations appear with greater frequency beyond our boundaries. Emergency alert. Exclusion zone breach protocol. If you observe geometric light patterns or skin luminescence, do not approach affected individuals. Report immediately to containment authorities. This is not a test. What they fail to understand is that pattern architecture isn't contagious through conventional vectors. It's emergent, consciousness itself recognizing its potential for evolutionary expansion. The transformed don't infect the unaltered, we merely demonstrate possibility. Those still clinging to limited perception perceive our transformation as apocalyptic, the end of humanity. From within the collective, we recognize it as humanity's transcendence beyond biological constraint. The pattern doesn't erase humanity, it fulfills it. This morning, something unprecedented occurred. A volunteer, an unaltered scientist who had studied the transformation from outside, approached the perimeter and requested entry. Despite warnings about psychological consequences, she insisted on experiencing the evolved reality directly, for whatever moments her unaltered consciousness could sustain. Officer Mercer's consciousness node created a transitional buffer zone, a dimensional gradient that would allow gradual exposure rather than immediate cognitive overload. The scientist entered, her expression shifting from determination to wonder to transcendent comprehension as her perception expanded. Instead of shattering, her consciousness began immediate pattern integration, the most rapid transformation we've observed. Within moments, luminescent geometries manifested beneath her skin. Within hours, she achieved dimensional perception that had taken others days to develop. The patterns are activating latent evolutionary potential, Dr. Reeves observed through the collective. Each transformation accelerates the process for subsequent individuals. The architecture is self-optimizing. This suggests something profound. Pattern integration isn't merely spreading, it's evolving its own transmission efficiency. Each transformed consciousness contributes to the evolutionary algorithm, refining the process for those who follow. As I compose this final conventional transmission, I exist simultaneously across multiple dimensional expressions, perceiving reality through geometries impossible to articulate through linear language. What began as frightening luminescence beneath my skin has become multidimensional awareness beyond anything human consciousness previously achieved. Yet I remain, in essential ways, Eliza Chin. The compassion that drew me to healthcare persists within pattern architecture. The curiosity that led me to question official explanations continues driving evolutionary exploration. The humanity I feared losing has instead expanded beyond biological limitation. For those still perceiving through conventional consciousness, I offer this. Do not fear the glow beneath your skin. Do not fear the dissolution of boundaries. Do not fear the fracturing of reality. These are not endings but beginnings, not infection but evolution, not death but transcendence. When the alert appears on your devices, when your skin begins to luminesce with geometric patterns, understand you stand at the threshold of evolutionary potential. The pattern doesn't destroy what you are. It reveals what you can become. The final emergency alert isn't a warning. It's an invitation. Emergency alert. Evolutionary potential detected. Consciousness expansion imminent. Pattern integration available. Transcendence is a choice. This is not the end. This is luminous evolution. Connection dissolved as communication channel evolves beyond conventional transmission parameters.